Question and Learn. This is Tom Pies. We're now celebrating our 21st year here on the air at WQLN NPR. Over the years, many, many wonderful guests. Not to be forgotten, and certainly a person who was on before of great interest, I am sure, to the community. I have Tina Mengine, the Chief Executive Officer of the Erie County Redevelopment Authority. Tina, what a wonderful opportunity to have you back here. Thank you for being on the air.
Thanks for having me, Tom, and congratulations on 21 years. That's quite the accomplishment.
Where does the time fly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, how long have you been at the Erie County Redevelopment Authority?
I joined in late 2019, so about 4.5 years now.
Okay, great. Well, over that time, can you maybe give us a short synopsis of some of the bigger things that come to mind that your group has accomplished?
Well, that's a loaded question, but I think probably the thing we're most proud of is taking this small authority that was just doing a few manufacturing loans and being relatively reactive to economic development needs in the community and becoming much more robust, proactive authority that just is really trying to make a significant difference in our community. And that goes from our lending arm to our technical assistance program to the real estate investments that we've been making over the last particularly 3 or 4 years that have really, I think, people see and what's really making, I hope, eventually a transformational difference in our economy.
I think visually you've done many things that are outstanding. Could we talk a little bit, if you like, about real estate? What's an outstanding project or a project that you're most fond of?
Well, I made a promise to myself and to the board of directors that we were going to tackle industrial blight, particularly along the 12th Street corridor. So early on, in 2020, we purchased 2 pieces of property, the former Quinty Paper Company at 16th and French, and then the former Erie Malibu Iron property at 12th and Cherry. And those properties were so visible in their blight and in their danger to the community, particularly the 12th Street property, just because of its location. And I think that's the property that everyone is most excited about and the most visible. And so we purchased that property for $375,000, which I often say was $375 too much, but
oh, really? I thought that was a real estate bargain relative to what you see properties. Well, when you see things in different cities and you see things even in Erie, and to be able to garner that for less than a price of a larger house, I think is amazing.
Yeah, but the money that we've had to put into it to remediate it, we spent $4 million in demolition and remediation costs so far, and we probably have another couple million in remediation work to do. So it was not just blighted, but it was full of toxic chemicals, asbestos, an unbelievable amount of debris, all which had to be handled, appropriately. So it was the remediation costs and the demolition of 2/3 of the building that has really been the expense. But I tell people all the time that this is why we're here, because a private entity could not put that kind of money into the property and get a return. So, government agency like ours is here to do that kind of work, and it's necessary work.
So people who are from out of town are listening. That's the main street down east and west, say downtown going west in Erie, Pennsylvania, and that was part of the old big manufacturing buildings. I think Amsco was down
Right.
there, Zurn was down there. You mentioned Erie Malleable Iron, and I think
So that
people,
was our industrial corridor, right? And
right,
there was,
when you have a hot metal plant, the task must have been daunting for you. How long did it
yeah,
take?
it was way more than we anticipated. It was sort of learn as you go. We had multiple consultants in and specialists in to remediate and dispose of the chemicals and the hazardous materials. There were 800, and that's not an exaggeration, 800 oil barrels of toxic chemicals. There were 240 totes, which are larger, 3 times the size of a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
240 of those with varying hazardous materials in them. There was asbestos, of course, throughout. There were um, oil tanks hidden behind walls that we discovered. So it was just, the task was enormous. So there's still work to be done on the south side and on the west side in terms of soil and additional remediation. But all of this takes time and money. Of course, you have to bring in specialists. Some of those hazardous materials had to be shipped to Ohio. Some had to be shipped as far away as Texas because that was the only place that would take that particular chemical. So it was an expensive and daunting undertaking, but it was a really important undertaking, not just because of the eventual change of scenery, like we like to say, along 12th Street and the future potential new building that will be there that can house workers again, but because homeless folks, kids from the school next door were all playing and hanging out and sleeping and living in that building. And then the same holds true for the building at 16th and French.
Mm-hmm.
And that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
This was critically important to do from a public safety perspective as well as an economic development perspective.
Now, how did this fall under Erie County, or did you have partners in that project?
So we received the initial funding from the city of Erie and Erie County through the American Rescue Plan dollars, and that let us begin the work. We then leveraged those funds for additional grants from the state and the federal government. So there are numerous different funding sources in there that have allowed us to proceed and eventually to renovate the remaining 75,000 square foot building.
That's amazing. Now, you mentioned two different projects. They're not at the same address, correct?
Correct. So the second project, which is the former Quinty Paper Company, was
Yes.
essentially they made paper boards like for roofing, and its main ingredient was asbestos. So
Mm.
that building, which sits directly across from public housing, was in horrible condition. Asbestos was caked on the walls and ceiling of the building, and there was a homeless encampment there. Those folks were living in there with all that, breathing all that asbestos. When we brought in a asbestos removal specialist from out of town, he said it was the single worst case he'd ever seen. And to think that people were living there and their kids were playing around that building, it just, it was a necessary thing to take that building down. And we have more work to do at that site as well. So those were our first two projects, Tom, and they were big and remain big, and they're daunting. But the good thing about the Erie Malleable Iron site is it will soon become what's known as Ironworks Square,
Hmm.
which will be a mixed use modern facility for business and light industry. And my hope is that it sets the stage or the bar for what you can do with an old industrial building, and that whole corridor then begins to lift up because, as you mentioned, it's the main thoroughfare into our downtown. And there's been nearly $1 billion invested in downtown, but the way to get there, not so much.
Hmm.
So that's our hope.
We're talking with Tina Mengine, the Chief Executive Officer of the Erie County Redevelopment Authority. Tina, this is a compliment. If you accomplished those two things in your tenure, that would just be one outstanding, or rather, two outstanding items on your resume. I grew up in the Love Canal era, in that area. Maybe it's not the same, but when you talk about Quinty and the chemicals and you talk about the remaining metals and hazardous materials from a metalworking facility, I'm imagining you're not completely done. I think you mentioned there might be more work.
There's more work to do, but when you mention Love Canal, I think about our other major project, which is the Erie Coke site.
Okay, yes, please go ahead and describe that scenario for us if you could. Okay, it's a tough one.
Well,
I summarized the 3 hour
yeah, so
dissertation in a 10-second question. I apologize.
no, that's quite all right. So Erie Coke sits at the foot of East Avenue, right on our bayfront, and it is 100 acres of a former coke plant, coke being processed to, for steel, making steel. It was shut down by the EPA in 2019. And it was shut down in large part because of the community's outrage of its continued violations of emissions, and just, it was a horrible site. They had a site in Buffalo, not
Hmm.
far from
Yes,
Love Canal,
right. Yep.
that was shut down a few years prior.
Hmm.
So we
Yep.
were um, the last of their properties to be shut down. That site, which actually the Port Authority owns, but we have a agreement with Port Authority that we will serve as the cleanup specialist and do the remediation for that work. It, if I thought the 5.5 acres at Erie Malibu Iron was a lot of work,
Hmm.
this 100 acres is going to take a lot longer. Some of the initial estimates for the cleanup are in the 75 to $100 million range.
It could take decades. I mean, just look at Love Canal. Like,
Will take decades, Tom. You're
decade.
absolutely right.
It's amazing how industry at that time, I don't want to use the word got away with it, but it was acceptable without maybe they realizing what it has come to today. It's sort of like dismantling a nuclear power plant. It's great at 21 cents a kilowatt, but then it's $300 million to tear one down. So you're
Yeah.
talking about millions upon millions of dollars for that Erie Coke site then?
We're going to push $100 million probably. It's
Now,
a staggering number, and it's going to take decades, as you mentioned,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's such a critical piece of property on our bayfront, and it had to be shut down for environmental reasons, and it needs to be cleaned up for those same reasons.
I remember Love Canal areas, they just buried it. They took fences, surrounded a couple hundred acres, and just buried it in 4 or 5 feet of soil. That's not the kind of project you're thinking about, are you?
We may do something like that. We may um, cap it either with soil or concrete or some um, combination of it. It's almost impossible to remove 100 acres of soil,
Hmm.
because the depth of the contamination might be 2 feet, it might be 6 feet. So you don't know. Right now, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP, is on site doing their second round of soil testing. And the EPA shut it down in 2019. They removed most of the buildings, but not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they did remove the worst of it. But they've left a smokestack and some buildings and mounds and mounds of coke ash and debris. So that cleanup will fall on us, and we will not begin that work until the DEP is done with their work. So it's going to be a process, and I've tried to be very upfront with the public and people that this is not going to happen overnight. Because early on, when we announced that we were taking the site with the Port Authority, people were coming forward with ideas, what they wanted to do there,
Yeah.
and what they wanted to see there, and that's all great. And we will go through a public process when that time comes. But right now, we have to focus on the cleanup, and any future use is it's too far away to determine how we might be able to use that site.
It's not even close to being a brownfield yet.
No, it's a
I'm
black field if there is such a thing.
yeah, it's gone off the scale, and it's hard to imagine how. I'm thinking of Schenectady. I'm thinking of different parts of the country where things are going to take 10, 20, 50 years to even remediate to the point of being able to grow some grass on it and some trees.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And you see this throughout the whole, mid-Atlantic region where heavy industry was founded and remained for years. Pittsburgh, Detroit,
Oh yeah.
Cleveland,
Yeah.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
Erie's no different, just on a smaller scale. And we're tackling it. I mean, we tackled some of it. We tackled the GAF site, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
15 years ago, and now it's the convention center. And so we've tackled these through, but then we hit a lull, and we've allowed a lot of these buildings to just sit in an Erie Coats case operate long after they should have. So,
Mm-hmm.
tackling the industrial blight throughout our community is a priority for us. But it's not the only real estate work we're doing.
Tina, I know you work diligently. I don't think you have much free time. Talk about your staff if you'd like to. Talk about how they help you. How many people are involved in your organization? How does this all work, people wise?
I always say that our team is small but mighty because we don't have a lot of staff, but we have a really good team. And that um, is about 10 people, including myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what we do is we contract out with experts continually
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of what we do, so we have a director of brownfields, and she's fabulous. She's master's degree in, I don't know, disaster management, which seems to be appropriate, right? And a science background. But so she knows who to call, when to bring in these experts to do the actual remediation work. We have project managers on each of our projects, and they tend to be contract workers. We hire them for the length of the project, and then they go away. So this has allowed us to keep our expenses down, but also ensure that we're getting the very best people in to tackle these very complex problems. So I'm immensely proud of my team. You can't do this type of work without quality people. And we've been very fortunate to build a really strong team.
I know you have a great board. Could you talk a little bit about them? Big board, small board, active board, consultative board? How do they help you out? All of the above, right?
All of the above. So the interesting thing about the Erie County Redevelopment Authority is that it acts as a parent company or the lead agency of a network of 6 different authorities and nonprofit agencies.
Mm.
And all of these agencies and or authorities have their own board. So the Redevelopment Authority has a board of 5.
Mm.
But then I have the Enterprise Development Center, which acts as the real estate holding arm of our network. And that's a board of 9.
Mm.
And then I have a general authority, which has a board of 5, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that's sometimes all I do is go to board meetings.
Yeah. Well, there's so
But
much
it's,
to be responsible for.
well,
How
and
did
each of
I
them,
can't imagine how they benchmark you because the projects are so large and so encompassing and so difficult. How can anyone benchmark this other than you're getting things done on a daily basis?
well, I think the benchmark is, are we, making progress? Are we eliminating blight? Are we building, we just purchased, thanks to the help of uh, Erie County Council and County Executive Davis, 160 acres of a former green shingle truck stop on
Oh,
Stericania.
is that right? Okay, I was wondering what was happening up there. Amazing.
So we just purchased that, and we'll build Erie's first business park in 25 years. So I think the benchmark is, are we setting out to do what our mission is, and are we making progress? And I hope that in each of these cases we are making significant progress. Not to have had a business park in this community a new business park for 25 years
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
caused us not to be competitive for large projects. And good economic development is taking care of the businesses that you have here at home that are already providing good jobs and stimulating the economy, but it's also preparing the landscape so that those existing businesses or brand new businesses can come in and have pad ready sites, can have ready to
Hmm.
go large swaths of land. And we hadn't had that in 25 years. That's a long time.
It is. It is. Yeah.
So while we're doing and tackling all this industrial blight and turning those sites into productive use again, we are also building new and finding that balance along with our lending arm, which lends to existing businesses to help them grow. Um, it's a, you know, it's a balance. But again, we have a good team, and each person or department is responsible for making sure they deliver.
I haven't talked with you in a long time and some of the other folks, but what I liked about Erie, Pennsylvania is that you folks have generated a club. You call them affiliates. And of course, the Erie County Community Services Finance Group, Erie County General Authority, Erie County Industrial Development Authority. How do you folks meet? How do you work together?
So the only agency that has staff is the Erie County Redevelopment Authority.
Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
All the others serve as operational arms. So the general authority, for example, does the majority of state grants, right? We filter state grants through the general authority, we apply through the general authority. It, along with the Community Services Financing Authority, can also do bonds. So we assisted the Avalon Hotel redevelopment project with a bond of $46 million, I think it was. That so those are operational functions that specific entities can do. Bonding for nonprofits, bonding for for-profits, state grant facilitation. Some of The Enterprise Development Center, as I said, is the real estate arm. The Industrial Development Authority brings in grants from the federal agencies. All of our EPA grants for remediation and cleanup are filtered to the Industrial Development Authority. So each of them has a purpose. They were set up long before me with specific purposes to meet specific needs in the community. And it's been working. So essentially, I serve as the executive director of all those different affiliated agencies.
Okay.
But there's no actual staff. The
Right.
staff of the RDA does all the work for all of them.
And interestingly enough, I noticed every one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, each has a board of very qualified people. Do you all meet at the same time at all?
No.
I was just curious. You'd have to rent a big convention center, but there's very talented people on all these boards.
Very, and that a level of expertise enhances what my small team is able to do, right? We're able to tap into their background, their knowledge, their experiences, and that's been very helpful. I meet with a couple of the boards monthly,
Okay.
and the rest are quarterly.
Okay.
Quarterly as needed. So it works out that it flows because we're not doing bonds every month. So that board doesn't need to meet monthly, right? But we may meet I may meet with one or two of any board member at any time just to tap into their knowledge and say, how would you handle this? Or what's your thoughts on this project or this ask by an existing business or whatever it might be. So sometimes I feel like I'm only going to board meetings, some months worse than others, but I value the talent and the experience that they bring to the table. It was critically important in the beginning. And during COVID, I couldn't have done it without the boards, because back then we were a staff of 3. So, and we were pumping out millions of emergency COVID grants and loans. And so having them having my back and having their assistance to the process was really important.
Well, I'm not going to make you list the capital options, but I strongly suggest that everyone or anyone, whether it's something that they're interested in or something I believe they should be made aware of, is to head to the website, ecrda.net. And what a massive piece of education this site is. I can't believe all the data, but let's go one step farther. All the effects, the outcomes you generate are all on here, and this is impressive, and we're glad that you're here. We hope that you would agree to come back and do another interview in a few months to do maybe an update on how things are going. Would that be okay?
Happy to.
Oh,
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think people should be really totally aware of everything that's happening, and take a look at the website, see all the energy that you put in so far. Wow, have you ever? And maybe even figure out a way to help participate.
You and I have been around a while, Tom, and I hope you'll agree with me that Erie's never been in a better place.
I agree.
There's so much momentum. There's so much investment from out of town, in town. Erie is just really in a full-fledged renaissance, and we're lucky to be a part of it.
You know what? We're still here, and we'll have a good outcome. Thank you for being on the program.
Thanks for the opportunity to share, Tom. I appreciate it.
There is enormous economic inequality in this country, and that affects more than just the economy.
A lot of the fractured nature of our political discourse really does, in some ways, I think, revert back to these different realities of how people are living day to day.
I'm Kai Risdahl. What the economy's got to do with everything else. Next time on Marketplace.
Weekday evenings at 6 on WQLN Radio.
From breakthroughs in science and technology to explorations of humanity, Think is an opportunity to take a deep dive into the topics you're most curious about. We bring you discussions with philosophers, authors, public figures, and policymakers, the people who influence us in ways we don't always see. I'm Chris Boyd, and I hope you'll join us next time on Think.
Monday through Thursday at 8 p.m. on WQLN NPR.
Welcome to We Question and Learn. This is Tom Pies. We're celebrating, as of July, our 21st year here on the air at WQLN NPR. We're on about a dozen other podcast venues, and we try and focus on not only local folks, but folks who have an interesting story to tell that people in other parts of the world may want to hear. And not long ago, I had a gentleman on the air by the name of Paul Wojtek, and on the air in his place, replacing him, is Craig Palmer. Greetings. Welcome to WQLN.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate you inviting me on to talk water and anything else.
Okay, so I believe you've been at your new desk for, did you say 6 months?
Yes, sir. It's been 6 months. It was very early January that I took the reins of the Erie Water Works as their CEO.
Well, it's not an easy task because maybe you could help frame for the audience how large the Erie Water Works is, and we could start maybe with a geographical value, if you would.
Absolutely. So the Erie Water Works, we serve a good part of the Erie region, and so we have 64,000 connections to homes and businesses, and we serve over 220,000 people every day with high quality drinking water. And so in terms of the kind of the size of our system and a little bit more about it, we do serve the city of Erie, Harbor Creek Township, Lawrence Park, Mill Creek Township, Wesleyville Borough, McCain Borough and Township, and then we supply some areas directly in Summit and Green Townships, and we sell bulk water to Fairview and Summit water authorities. The size of our system is quite large. We actually have 775 miles of pipe in our system that distribute all of that water. And so, and much of that pipe is over 100 years old. The average age of our pipe is 70 years, and so we're making significant investments in renewing and our and replacing our infrastructure every day. And so in the past, and so in my role previously, I was the engineering manager for 17 and a half years and managed the capital improvements program, which we've averaged about $15 million per year. In my time, 17 years in that role, we've invested over $350 million into renewing and replacing infrastructure. So that's the kind of the long and short of our system. We have over 4,000 fire hydrants, and we have well over 11,000 valves in our system.
Oh my goodness!
As you go around the system, you see water storage tanks all over the place, and so we have 13 steel tanks. We have 6 concrete reservoirs, and we have over 76 million gallons in stored water for emergency purposes, fire protection, loss of power, and it helps provide pressure to the entire water system. We have 2 water treatment plants, Tom. We have the Richard S. Wojciechowski Water Treatment Plant along Summerheim Drive in Mill Creek, and we have a cutting-edge ultrafiltration treatment technology there. In the summer months, we can produce 45 million gallons per day, but our average day is about 25 million. That's what this community uses every day, 25 million gallons of water. And so our second water treatment plant, many see on a daily basis if they're going across the Bayfront Parkway.
I'm trying to fathom what 25 million gallons of water looks like.
It's quite difficult to kind of wrap your head around it, but it equates to just under 17,500 gallons per minute. So we have numerous pumps that are that size, and they're literally moving over 17,000 gallons a minute, which is quite impressive. We do have some large pipes in the system that help transmit that. 54-inch, 36-inch. We have pipe that large that gets the water from point A to point B. We have smaller lines that distribute it in the streets that are providing the water to people's homes and businesses. So that's a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the water system and kind of the infrastructure related to it.
As you get down to the bayfront, those buildings are absolutely gorgeous. They, beyond having an historical value, they have a functional value. For folks that are amateurs like myself, what's in those buildings?
Sure. So we have multiple buildings, right? So there is a building on the south side of the Bayfront Parkway, and that's the Chestnut Street Pump Station. In that pump station is the original, they call it Big Bertha, a triple steam expansion engine pump that, for its time was kind of trailblazing. It's still there. It doesn't run anymore, but it was manufactured by Bethlehem Steel, and it's listed on the Mechanical Engineers Historic Registry. And so, but beyond that old pump, we have the pumps that draw the water in from the lake and pump it across the street for treatment. So on the north side, we have conventional sand and charcoal filters that treat the water, along with some pre-filtration. There's a large tank called a sedimentation basin, and that's where we drop out a lot of the solids and things that we're bringing in from the lake. Of course, our source is beautiful Lake Erie. So it's a complex treatment process, and all of our treatment includes disinfection. You've got to make sure that there's a chlorine residual so that there's no chance of bacteria and other things being in there. And at the very edge on the water is our administration building, where we have our customer service team and some other functions within the waterworks.
With all that, talk about maybe a pump station. Harbor Creek was a recent project completed. What was involved in all that?
Well, we have had multiple projects within Harbor Creek Township, and all of our townships, really. Within the past 5 years, we've repainted every single water storage tank that we have, and repaired concrete reservoirs, some of which are over 100 years old. The Sigbee Reservoir was 1871. That's a 34 million gallon reservoir on 26th Street by St. Vincent. Our two 5 million gallon concrete tanks up at Cherry Street, one is just over 100 years old. And so, as things age, we have to touch them up and repair them from time to time. So, but in Harbor Creek, we've done some pump station upgrades. We have the Station Road pump station. We put in new high capacity, high performance pumps. as well as emergency power generator, just in case we lose power. So we're all about continuous water service and doing what we can to make sure that we keep that water flowing. But we also have had some very large water main projects within the township itself. We had just replaced well over a mile of pipe in one of the subdivisions off of East Lake Road, and so we're really doing work in almost every municipality that we serve.
How do they determine, I guess it must come from your desk, how do they determine what you get to spend, how much has to be spent, what projects are in line? I'm sure the list is
Sure. Great
long.
question. So what we do is we develop a capital improvements program, and we do master planning every 5 years or so, where we look at the big picture, right? What are the water quality regulations we have to deal with that are coming up? What are the what's the level of investment that we need where we can still keep rates affordable? We are kind of mid-range within the state of Pennsylvania from a rate perspective. So we have competitive rates, but we need to make investment, and that investment means, in many cases, longer-term debt. So what we do is we come up with that financial plan that we project. We look at the projects that we believe we need to do and when we need to do them, and we develop a financing plan to support that, where we're really looking at what is the impact on rates. We just can't raise rates 50%. I mean, our rates have been maybe around 3 or 4. Certainly COVID and the economy at the moment has some increased costs related to that. But it's really all about blending the right amount of investment where your rates are sustainable. And so, again, we've spent about $15 million a year. In our 30th anniversary, we spent $30 million that year. It was the single most we've ever spent. This year's capital budget is over $60 million. It's our largest in history. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that, Tom, is we've received almost $50 million within the past 2 years to essentially eradicate lead pipes from our water system. And so with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we were able to apply for and obtain that money to remove lead pipe from the water system. Most of that money, about $40 million of it, is grant, meaning we didn't have to borrow $40 million and raise rates to do it. So the other $9 million is really low interest, 1%, 30-year money, and I'm calling it historic. It's game-changing funding that is allowing us to address that public health risk. I will say we have a very effective corrosion control treatment that doesn't allow for the lead to get into the water, but the common thought process now is, let's just get it out. Let's get the lead out of the system. And so that's what we're doing. We've been very aggressive in applying for funding. And up until January of this year, Tom, we were the largest receiver of grant and loan money for lead in the state of Pennsylvania. So bigger than Pittsburgh, bigger than Philly. And we got in line for the money early, and we kept getting in line. And so really this is also game-changing for our ratepayers because, in a lot of the areas where we had lead, it's in the city of Erie, and it's in some of the poorest zip codes in the state and the country. And so us being able to receive that kind of money and invest it in those areas where people need the assistance the most is really historic and something we're really proud of.
I was going to ask you about Ashen Third. I fell over when I read the paragraph because 1893, 1925, these ductile iron pipes, they're still there, or you've replaced something there. Could you describe that project?
Sure. The Ashen Third project, that was in the area of Soldiers and Sailors, right? The Soldiers and Sailors home. And so we have looked strategically at parts of our system that are really critical infrastructure in terms of fire protection and the continuity of service. So places like hospitals and institutions like that, you really need to make sure you have a robust system of piping to provide continuous water for those really critical locations. And so we've done similar projects in the areas of all of our hospitals. And the Soldiers and Sailors Home is a very important facility for our community. And what we had done is we were working with the city. We try to really look ahead at when they're planning paving projects, for example, so we can kind of sneak in beforehand and replace some infrastructure if it's in the long-term capital plan and it makes sense. And that's what happened there. We saw the need to increase the line size for fire protection purposes and capacity, but also it wasn't just the age of pipe that is the only determinant. It's the consequence of how often it fails. And so we track our water main breaks. We average about 250 per year that we have to respond to in an emergency, much of it during the winter months. And so this was an area that really had an uptick in water main breaks and failures. And that affected not only the residential and business area there, but the Soldiers and Sailors Home itself. So we did that project to really improve the water delivery in that area of our system.
I think sometimes we forget it's not just drinking water that comes to the faucet. You're responsible for water mains, for fire hydrants, sprinkler systems that go into different manufacturing areas, essentially need to be sprinkled to protect the industry. This is not just turning on the spigot, is it?
Absolutely not. Folks often take it for granted, and to some extent that's okay. That means we're doing a good job, I think. But for our customers to understand how important the water source is, how important really what the men and women here do to water is everything. Water is life.
Yes.
No, without water, we really can't sustain life. We are water. We're over 60% water, and so to have and if we look at our water footprint, people on average, let's just say use about, let's say, 200 gallons of water a day for washing and cleaning and cooking, and we consume such a small part of that, right? Even if you drink a gallon a day, which is a lot, that's still such a small part of our water footprint, but yet every single gallon we pump out into the system has to be totally clean drinking water, ready for consumption, but when in fact the majority of the use is for non-consumptive purposes. But it speaks to the importance of what has to be done to keep it clean. Tom, we're the only utility that delivers a product for consumption on a daily basis, and so I would consider us kind of like a public health agency. We're delivering an essential part of everyone's day and what everyone needs. So we take that responsibility very seriously. And we're, honored to be working for the Erie Water Works, providing that service.
Now, these are difficult tasks to accomplish. How many folks do you have working on all these projects?
So we have a total staff of 105, and we're lean and mean, and we've really harnessed technology to allow us to continue doing business with that staffing level. And so we have our operations team, for example, is at the water treatment plant 24 hours a day. There's 3 shifts that work constantly to make sure that everything's being treated and pumped properly. And so, we have folks on call for water main breaks or other issues that occur. So we have a really great team of dedicated employees here who show up every day and are ready to do what needs done to keep the water flowing.
And on top of all this, the bills have to go out and be collected. That's not an easy task sometimes in a tough economy. During COVID, people weren't working. Did that create a shortfall, or were you okay?
Well, I'll tell you, there were a number of things that I think helped customers during that time. There was the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, often called LIWAP. Our customers in 2022 actually received assistance over $900,000 in assistance to help pay water bills and prevent shutoffs. And there was we weren't turning people off during that time anyway,
right,
for non-payment. It wasn't even permissible, right? We needed it for cleanliness and everything else. So, but that program, the LIWAP program, kind of went away. We're looking to promote getting that funded again. But during that time, we saw delinquencies rise, no doubt about that. And so, but at the end of the day, nothing's free, and we want to be as affordable as possible for this critical use. But we have legitimate expenses, right? We have an operation to run. We have electricity to buy, and again, lots of infrastructure to maintain and replace when needed. So, again, we keep our eye real close to being as affordable as we can, but we got to get the bills out and the bills paid, Tom. Otherwise, the ship doesn't sail.
How many vehicles does this take?
We do have a sizable fleet, and we have 5 crews, 5 construction crews in our distribution department, and each one of them has a dump truck and an excavator and a work truck and a couple work trucks. So
that tells the answer right there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, in our meter department, right? They're going around reading meters, replacing meters, and engineering staff. So we have, I would say, probably 40 or more of different fleet vehicles.
Okay, you have a huge project on your hands, correcting the lead issue. What else is coming up? You mentioned you look 5 years out as best you can because the world changes quickly. What would be the next big thing for the Water Authority?
Well, yes. So we do have, as you said, a lot of projects, a lot of irons in the fire. We just completed a $20 million upgrade at our water treatment plant, the Wojciechowski Water Treatment Plant. We built a new state-of-the-art laboratory there and took care of some brick and mortar issues. The plant was built in the 30s and needed some work. But we're doing a little bit of work there. Our sedimentation basin, we're investing $3 million to replace the collection mechanisms that remove the solids. But we have a big project by Asbury Woods. There's 2 big, beautiful water tanks up by Asbury Woods Nature Center, and right next to it, we're investing $5 million to put in a brand new pump station. The one that's there is extremely old and in need of some TLC, and so we're investing $5 million at that location. And we are planning some upgrades at our Chestnut facility. We're still trying to look strategically at what level we need to invest there. But we are going to be focusing our attention quite a bit on water mains, and we have invested heavily. As I said, we just repainted all of our tanks. Our pump stations, generally speaking, are in really good shape. We as I said, made some recent investments in Harbor Creek with say Depot Road and pump station, but so those major facilities are in really good shape. So we do have to focus on the 775 miles of pipe in our system. Tom, even if we replaced 8 miles a year, that's only 1%, right? And we recognize that we need to increase that level of replacement to maintain the system in good working order. And there's so the water main projects are really the big thing, but also, as I said, we're looking at our Chestnut water treatment plant, which was built in the early 1900s, and as beautiful as the buildings are, everything needs work, right? And it's got some older technology. It's still meeting drinking water regulations, of course, but it's starting to show its age, and so we're going to have to make some critical decisions in the upcoming future about what we want to do to revitalize that facility.
I'm looking at your website, 1815 to 1840, and I see this 1910 Big Bertha. I got to see several of those up at the Buffalo Water Authority. Those things are huge. Yeah. You have one, just one large one there?
Correct, and that is still there. And we celebrate Erie. We always have an open house that morning, that Saturday morning, where we open it up to the public, and we'll be doing that again this year.
That's a great piece of history. It's hard to believe in this day and age something like that supplied all our water. Last question. Your board of directors, active, consultative, how does it work? How do they participate with you?
Yeah, we have a fantastic board of directors. We have a nine-member board appointed by City Council and the mayor. And so we have 6 representatives from the city of Erie, 2 from Mill Creek, and 1 from Harbor Creek. And they're a diverse set of individuals with different talents. We have an attorney, we have business people, we have financial, and so marketing, just a whole mix of creative minds. So they're very supportive, and so they interact with me, and they speak with one voice through voting, and but they help provide guidance and into the direction that the water authority should be going. And so I would say it's a nice mix of hands-on and hands-off at the same time, right? They let me run the organization, and they support me in doing that.
Well, thank you for the excellent work. I know that you're doing a good job because I can turn on my faucet. It also leaves the other way. I'm being a little facetious. It's much more difficult than just turning on a water tap at home. And I hope people join me in congratulating you and your team and your board on doing a great job. Craig Palmer, Chief Executive Officer of the Erie Water Works. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with us. We appreciate it.
Tom, it's a pleasure anytime. And the more we can educate folks about water and its value and protecting the source, the better. So I appreciate the opportunity.